Welcome, everybody. Welcome to Fraternity Foodie. This is Mike Eilon with Greek University, and welcome to the 32nd episode of our podcast. We call this Fraternity Foodie because there is nothing like good food to bring people together. We have such a fun guest today. I am so excited. With us today is Sterling Jowers, an alumnus of Sigma Pi Fraternity from Beta Mu Chapter at Ole Miss. Welcome to the show, Sterling.
Hey, Mike.
Hey, good to have you on board today. So today I wanted to have a financial professional because I think finances for chapters are really critical. And I think you can definitely speak better to the finances and the health of a chapter than most. So I am so excited to have you here today. I remember back to the first time that we met. At the time, you were still an undergraduate at Ole Miss. I was visiting all the chapters of Sigma Pi as executive director back in 2012. I'm curious, why did you choose to join Sigma Pi despite being so busy getting your degree in accounting, which I know is not an easy major because I was an accounting major myself. So why Sigma Pi? Why go Greek?
So when I was at Ole Miss, it was really neat to see some of the folks that I became friends with my first few days, first few weeks of school. And one of the most awesome things about it was we all kind of had this similarity, and we wanted to have like lasting friendships that went, past our undergrad, past graduate school. And now, it's been nice to see the fruit of it because, 4 to 5 years after I graduated with my graduate degree, I'm going through weddings and we're, meeting up for different, events. And, it's just been really neat to see that kind of fruition over time. Yeah. So
Yeah,
one of the
it's
things was
amazing. I mean, that's going to continue, I'm sure, for a lifetime. It's pretty amazing how those bonds can really last through weddings and children and all of those fun things through life. That is really cool. Now, it's interesting that the history of Beta Mu Chapter at Ole Miss is kind of unique in that it really started out with just a handful of men, no house whatsoever at Ole Miss, which is kind of, the kiss of death, not having a house on that campus. And then it just seemed like you just grew every single semester, every year into larger and larger homes on campus. And now the chapter, is well over 200 men. So from your perspective, how has Sigma Pi been able to attract so many new members? I'm sure a lot of chapters around the country would love to know the secret.
Yeah, for sure. So I think one of the reasons that we've been so successful in recruitment has been because we've had, very genuine brothers who reach out to people and develop connections with people who are also very genuine. And I think that kind of just takes off. It spreads like wildfire, especially at Ole Miss, where there's a place where so many people come from so many different areas of the world, the country, different, the Southeast, whatnot. And we've been able to really just kind of hone in on brothers from certain areas who have friends who are like-minded. And one of the things, at least in Sigma Pi, is having a bunch of folks, a lot of brothers who are like-minded. And so I think that's been a very fruitful exercise at Ole Miss Beta Mu Chapter. And just how the culture is in the Greek life there has really kind of enhanced us to pick up how or look at our house, look at our national office. So I think all that kind of ties together.
Yeah. I think Beta Mu always did things the right way. I remember that there were a lot of chapters on campus that would get into trouble around recruitment time. There would be all kinds of violations and things like that. And I remember just saying, you know what, just do things the right way. If you just do things the right way, you're going to be successful.
Correct.
So,
very much.
All right. So I know you eventually received your master's degree in taxation from Ole Miss, and now you do tax accounting. So
Yes.
why choose tax accounting? Why is that the path that you're going to travel in life?
I think one of the best things is I love helping people. And because of that, God blessed me immensely with an ability to look at accounting in a certain way, and tax as a passion of mine, to be able to help navigate super complex matters, whether that be states, cities, federal tax, all the changes with the Tax Cuts of Jobs Act, all the legislation passed, and kind of navigating some of the discussions moving into this next presidential race. So a lot of it's just this ability that I love to keep learning. And I love to kind of help people along the way.
Yeah, the really beautiful thing about accounting is that you're never really looking for work. There's always a need for somebody to be able to
Yes,
kind of look at a balance sheet and income statement, find people that, might be cheating the system, looking for shortcuts. Somebody with your
right,
background can really find that very easily. And so I think there's always a need for that. It's never going to go out of style in terms of a
right.
major, in terms of a field. So that's really good. One of the things that's kind of related that I wanted to ask you about, we're seeing lots of fraud happening within, could be chapter directors, even alumni from a particular chapter, where they start to steal money from the chapter itself. So, what are
Yes.
some steps that a chapter can implement to reduce the possibility of fraud from either an advisor or maybe even an exec board member, like a chapter president or a chapter treasurer?
Sure. So I think the best direction to move is to have a simple system of accountability and to be able to effectively communicate, results and performance of, months, quarters, fiscal year end. Maybe even kind of look at the guides of how nonprofits work in accounting, just
Mhm.
on a local level. Just kind of run, some Excel documents. I know at Beta Mu, what we did was we had accountability at a chapter advisor level that was working with someone at our bank, our banker, who was also a chapter advisor, a chapter liaison, and then worked with our treasurer, which at the time was, I moved into that role. But then kind of worked with the national office as well, because if you have multiple levels of accountability, then you have multiple eyes on the same, items, and there's less, I'm trying to think of the best word, but there's less pressure to be able for one person to handle everything. And I think that's the trap a lot of people get in, is you want, segregation of duties
Mhm.
at an internal level. And that can be somebody from, maybe a treasurer has an advisory council in Sigma Pi. Maybe they use a banker and the banker looks every month at reconciliations. Not handling a lot of cash is key. We like to use Omega Phi. You could probably use QuickBooks, a simple version of QuickBooks to handle a lot of the stuff.
Mhm.
But a lot of it, as the less touch points you have with physical cash, the better off I think you all are.
Yeah, I agree with that completely. I know Sigma Pi has a partnership with Omega Phi, so I'd highly suggest if you have access to Omega Phi, you should definitely use it. Even
Yeah.
things like dual signatures on checks and things like
Yes.
that can really help to make sure that somebody else is overseeing. And if you have multiple eyes on it, to your point, could be chapter directors, could be the exec
Mhm.
board, could be the HQ, could be
Mhm.
bankers. You really need to have a lot of people checking this stuff out.
Correct. And not everybody's, finances is going to be as detailed as ours were. Ours were pretty in depth. Our budgets were pretty large, but our numbers were pretty high too. And so just having a high quality system is the most important, I guess,
Right.
aspect.
And I think if you're transparent to the chapter itself, maybe on a weekly basis, the chapter meetings, just giving a rough overview of where the chapter is at in terms of accounts receivable, in terms of
Hmm.
accounts payable, things like that. I just think that transparency just lends itself to more trust within the
Yes.
chapter.
Yes. No, I definitely just good record keeping, right? Just
Mhm.
some type of formal record keeping where you can look back month to month, period to period, whatever it is going to be the most simple but most helpful tool that
Yeah.
you can look at if any questions ever do arise.
I remember Brothers because I was also treasurer back in the day before I was president. And that was like one of the toughest jobs because Brothers would always come to me looking for money. And I'm like, no, like we have a budget. Like I don't just give you money because you ask for it. If it's in the
Right,
budget, then great. If it's not in the budget, then I'm sorry. I have to be the
right,
no guy, which is hard
right,
because a lot of undergraduates, we all feel this need to be well liked. And so it's hard to be the guy to say no.
right,
Yeah, but very
right.
necessary, of course. I'm also reading
Yes.
about situations where fraud is even happening on the administrative side of a university. So maybe the university is overseeing student government funds or maybe council level funds, IFC, Panhellenic, et cetera. Is there anything a student can do to prevent that kind of fraud from happening?
I think at a student level, I think knowing, you do have your dues that you do pay potentially to IFC, or, there might be kind of cross chapter engagements with the university. But I do think having maybe meeting with a university official, meeting with maybe a finance VP or provost will be really beneficial to really knowing how the university sees its own operations and what their internal audit mechanisms are. I think at the university level, whether that be a private institution or a public university. Public universities do have probably a little bit more robust or more, I guess, innovative ways to look at finances. But a lot of private universities do take the same approach to what public universities do. And so I think at a university level, what you can do is be aware of what their responsibilities are as a university, who's responsible for those funds or that activity that goes on, and then maybe even move to what would happen if funds were misallocated or there was a misappropriation of assets, because at that point it's pretty much under their control, under their direct supervision, which does it does alleviate some of the issues from a chapter by chapter perspective, but nobody wants their money misappropriated.
Right. That's good feedback. Let's talk about student loan debt. Student loan debt is now the second largest debt market right after mortgages. So what should students know about choosing majors, maybe even which university to go to, a public institution, a private institution? And also, what should students be thinking about in terms of how much they're borrowing in order to get that degree?
Sure. So a couple of items I'll normally hear just in my industry are maybe a total student loan indebtedness about 3 times what a starting salary would be, 3 to 4 times what a starting salary would be in that field. A lot of folks in education, a lot of folks in business, accounting. You kind of look at variety of different fields. Is the goal to go to a graduate school, or is the goal to get a PhD? Or law degree. I think just kind of having, you don't have to have all the details there, but maybe having a good just an idea of what the end goal is, to be able to see, maybe I go to a less expensive public university, or I take 2 years at a junior college. If I want to go into, maybe public education in a rural area or an area that doesn't see a lot of wealth. Maybe there are those steps that you take that you kind of just think through at the time. I think student loans, looking at it from, is the loan a public loan or is the loan a private loan, can really give different options. Public loans do have a lot of repayment periods, repayment options, potential forgiveness, and they always kind of adapt to what certain interest rates look like. A lot of times folks would say they're more advantageous to have than private student loans. Um, I guess one of the things on the student loan industry itself is a lot of folks are saying, look at, like you said, home mortgages. They're less willing to work with borrowers if something happens, if there's a hardship. But they say now student loan borrowers, student loan servicers are a lot better about servicing people and a lot better about flexibility than any other area of commercial banking
Hmm.
or
That's
commercial
really
lending.
interesting. Yeah. Really interesting, and that's a great ratio to keep in mind. So, I mean, if you're an accounting major, maybe right out of college, you're going to get a job at $40,000 a year. Using your
Right.
ratio, I really shouldn't be borrowing more than 120,000 in
Right.
student debt, essentially.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, obviously, looking at it from, okay, maybe I have my undergraduate paid for, or scholarships or grants or any type of financial aid assistance. And looking at, okay, maybe I do my graduate degree to be able to sit for, get the hours for CPA or whatever that is. But, just kind of keeping in at the end, you want to be able to move into your professional life and move into your career with being able to manage anything that you might have had a loan for, not using student loans for things like vehicles, and not using extra money that's dispersed from them for frivolous activities necessarily, to
Right.
really kind of hone in on just that educational perspective and the books and the computers or whatever it is. I think that really kind of lessens the balloon as well.
Yeah, that's great feedback. So, kind of going along that road, what else should students know about budget planning, financial goal setting, and maybe even using credit cards while they're in college? What types of things would you look at there?
Sure. So I think just one, a simplified checking account. I think that's a great, first area. Is their checking account separate, maybe at this point from their parents? Looking at, okay, these are my regular deposits, these are my regular credits. Looking at maybe getting a free checking account, not paying a lot of service fees at first. A lot of times a credit union will be a great option for folks to open up their own checking account, but just really kind of take advantage and just enjoy the luxury of just like simple opening, just managing, understanding what that is, and then really moving forward to understanding how credit works. I think credit is a very kind of its own beast, so to speak, with credit cards, because lenders want you to have credit history, but they also don't want you to have a lot of debt. But they also know that if you had any debt in the past, you're more willing to be able to service any future debt as long as you show a good payback history.
Hmm.
So it's kind of a two-edged sword there. But I think once you have an internship, once you have your first full-time job, kind of look at it from a perspective and maybe get a secured credit card if that's something you're interested in. You want to try to build your credit in a way where when you look at purchasing a home, when you look at purchasing or financing a vehicle, that you already have an established history. And then, of course, checking your credit score and your credit reports at least once a year are really great too, because there could be an instance where someone has tried to open an account in your name. You could be a victim of identity theft and not even know it. So I definitely think some of those kind of cursory ways to be able to mitigate any potential issues that you might have with it before you really even kind of open the door to it
Yeah.
is
I remember we did a fundraiser back at my chapter at the University of Buffalo 25 years ago where we were signing people up on college campuses to get credit cards.
wow.
And we would get paid per person that we would sign up for this credit card. And I think back on it now and I'm like, man, were we really doing the right thing? I mean, I know we were raising money, but then I start thinking about all these students that now get access to these credit cards and they might not really know what they're getting themselves into and how some decisions purchasing frivolous items as a college student, how that could affect them over a lifetime, some of those decisions.
Correct. Correct.
In terms of
Um,
buying a home, in terms of getting a car, all of those things, which many people will do right after college is over.
Correct. No, I think the years, the decades have kind of moved past. There's a lot more legislation out there that kind of disallows a lot of the signing up and getting kickbacks, and at least on an issuer level. I do think, as we kind of live as a culture, looking at how um, you don't really want to, make a Target run, or you want to make, go get a nice wallet or do something that you might be paying for years and years from now. The interest
Mhm.
rates on most credit cards are anywhere from 18% to 26 or 27% annually.
Mhm.
And that really can eat into that minimum payment that you might owe. You might, it is kind of hard to say no to a lot of things, but just being able to mitigate that moving forward, I think you do see a lot more of enjoyment in what you do have, and at some point you will be able to potentially do more and have more.
Mhm.
But a lot of that will take time.
Mhm.
So
What about working while you're in school? Do you suggest that students work part-time while they're in school? What do you think is the right balance between having to pay those bills and also studying for college classes? How much should a student be working?
So I would say, in my experience, I tutored a lot when I was in undergrad and graduate school. So it was more of a meet on one-on-one type basis. But a lot of folks, like I knew, worked for Panera. I think depending on if you can find a part-time position that allows you flexibility to what your class load looks like, and a lot of the folks in college and college towns know that a lot of their talent that they're using, a lot of their workforce is in school, and finding someone who appreciates that and respects that and understands that, it goes a long way. I know, I mean, Oxford Chick-fil-A was a huge employer of students, and they tried to work with each one to be able to look at their schedule and look at potential opportunities if they were traveling or they did study abroad or whatever that was. So I do think, a lot of folks will work part-time and, pay their own way, which is phenomenal, but also, kind of putting that time away for work and having that time for work. But then, if they have to take 12 hours or 15 hours or whatever that is, or maybe even take one of those 3-hour, intensive courses in the summer or spring break. I think, finding that balance between if you're in a chapter and you have a responsibility with your fraternity or sorority, or you have a part-time job and you have school, school probably comes first. And then of course, if you're paying your way or if you're, just making extra spending money, having that job kind of work in tandem with it. And then of course, having your responsibilities other places, not necessarily get the last of you, but be able to have a role that would fit the time that you can afford for that responsibility.
Mm-hmm. That's good advice. What about students saving while they're in college? How much should students be saving? How much should they be investing while they're still in college? Is that an option?
Sure. I know a lot of apps like Robinhood will be kind of popular among college students, especially business students who might have an investing club. I know just from recent developments in the trading industry, a lot of like Fidelity's, Ally Invest, I just mentioned Robinhood, they don't actually charge transaction fees anymore. So it's getting a lot of folks um, kind of, I guess, into the game of investing and trading. And I think maybe just having a few $100, a couple $100, just to kind of play around and see how that works will really kind of get them positioned if they decide to, invest in their 401k right after in their first full-time position or whatnot, to be able to see how that kind of looks like, what that does, and maybe some of the returns they have on it.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not sure if every private industry, well, not private industry, but private business like Fidelity. I haven't looked at all of their options with trade fees, but I have heard recently that a lot of those folks have gone away with transaction fees on the front end, at least.
Yeah, that's good news for college students that maybe want to try to test the market a little bit. I definitely suggest start really small.
Right.
Don't invest, a ton of money, but it's certainly a
Right.
good, I think, learning tool to kind of figure out how all of this works. Maybe start doing some basic research on companies and start to get your feet wet, but don't overextend yourself. That's
Right.
really important.
Right.
So that's really good. Now, I remember last time that I was in Houston visiting, I was speaking in town. We went out to eat at an excellent Mexican restaurant. It was really, really good. Food was incredible. So next time I'm in town in Houston, where should we be going out to eat?
So I think if you've ever eaten it or heard of Nico Nico's in Houston, it is traditional Greek food, but some of the best combination of fresh vegetables and cheeses and all the good stuff, I think is our next stop.
That sounds amazing. I can't wait. So all those universities in Houston, call me. I need to go out to
Yeah,
dinner with Sterling. Let's make this happen.
yeah, for sure.
That's really good. So let's say there's a student out there, maybe an advisor out there that has some more questions for you regarding the finances of the chapter or other concerns they might have, even personal investing and things like that. How should people connect with you if they're interested in learning more, or maybe they have some questions for you?
Sure. I would say probably the best way to connect with me is probably through email.
Okay.
And I'm sure you might already have my email address on your side. So maybe in the notes for the podcast, you could put that in there. I'm on LinkedIn. You could look me up on LinkedIn, Facebook, same way, Instagram. So there's multiple ways to reach me. If you have any questions, reach out to Mike, reach out to me directly. He knows how to reach me for sure. But yeah, for sure.
That's excellent. Listen, we really appreciate you being on the podcast today. It's great information that you're sharing. So I thank you so much. And I definitely appreciate our friendship. It's amazing to me how, we just built this friendship when you were an undergrad, and still to this day, I love catching up with you, hearing what you're doing in your professional life. For me, that's just really rewarding to see it come full circle and to see how much fraternity was a positive impact in your life.
Yeah.
And then just to get to see all of those great things happening to you now, and you using those skills that you developed while you were within the chapter in order to really just reach some amazing heights professionally. So I'm proud of you. I just want to let you know.
Well, I appreciate it, Mike. It's always been a pleasure being with you and just having, how awesome it is to have that connection with the executive office, to develop the relationships. Always cultivate and develop relationships at any level. And then, you can definitely have these strong relationships moving forward. So I
Yeah,
appreciate it.
that's fantastic. I really appreciate you saying that. And I agree. I mean, every opportunity that you have with a mentor, even if it is an alumni advisor, it could be an alumnus from another chapter, it could be the executive office, you never really know where those friendships are going to go and how ultimately that person can help you professionally down the road. So
Right.
I encourage everybody to reach out and get those mentors. That's one thing that I've noticed about college students today is that they don't have as many mentors as I had when I was in school. They usually depend on other students their own age for advice. And so I would strongly suggest expanding that pool of mentors, people who have been there, who have done that, because these people have access to things, resources, and people that you might need to connect with in the future. So keep
For
those
sure.
things in mind.
Thank you,
Really
Mike.
good. Hey, well, listen, thank you so much. Thank you to our listeners. Thank you. If you think that there's some value here and you want to share this with somebody else who might need it, please go ahead and share this information. And thank you so much for tuning in. We look forward to seeing you on the next episode of Fraternity Foodie. Bye for now.